Elizabeth Patterson stood alone in that sterile hospital corridor, and in that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. She pulled out her phone, opened her banking app, and stared at her life savings. $23,000. Without hesitation, her fingers moved across the screen. Transfer, all of it, every last cent to the hospital account. It wasn't enough to save her son, but it was everything she had. The confirmation screen glowed in the darkness. Transfer complete. But this wasn't just desperation. This was the beginning of a mystery that would unravel Elizabeth's entire understanding of redemption, sacrifice, and the thin line between salvation and damnation. 3 months earlier, Elizabeth thought she knew what her life would look like. She was a third-grade teacher in Columbus, Ohio, single mother, devoted to her 7-year-old son, Isaac. Their life wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs. Every morning, she'd pack Isaac's lunch with a little note inside. Every evening, they'd do homework together at their small kitchen table. On Fridays, they'd splurge on pizza and watch movies until Isaac fell asleep on the couch. It was a simple life, a good life, until the day Isaac collapsed during recess. Elizabeth was in the middle of teaching fractions when the principal burst through her classroom door. The look on his face told her everything before he said a single word. She ran, through hallways that suddenly seemed endless, out to the playground where paramedics were already loading her son into an ambulance. Isaac's small body looked so fragile on that stretcher. His eyes were open, confused, scared. "Mom," he whispered, "I just got tired." But this wasn't tired. This was something far worse. Dr. Martinez didn't waste time with soft words. "Your son has dilated cardiomyopathy with restrictive features. It's rare, aggressive, and his heart is failing faster than we initially thought." Elizabeth heard the words, but they felt distant, like someone was speaking underwater. "What does that mean?" "It means Isaac needs a heart transplant. Soon, without it." Dr. Martinez paused, then continued with clinical precision. 6 months. Maybe less. The world tilted. Elizabeth gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. Okay. We do the transplant. When can we start?" That's when Dr. Martinez slid a folder across the desk. Elizabeth opened it and saw numbers that might as well have been written in a foreign language. $850,000. Her insurance would cover $200,000. The rest? That was on her. "I'm a teacher," Elizabeth said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I make $42,000 a year." Dr. Martinez's silence was answer enough. If you're watching this story and feeling that grip of impossible choices, that moment when hope seems just out of reach, subscribe to our channel, because this is one of those real-life stories that proves miracles exist in the most unexpected places. These heartwarming stories remind us that even in our darkest hours, light can break through. Hit that notification bell, because what happens next will shock you. Elizabeth did what any mother would do. She fought. She created fundraisers, bake sales at the school where she taught, car washes on weekends. She posted Isaac's story everywhere, on every social media platform she could find. Local news picked up the story. The community rallied. Donations came in. $5 here, $20 there. $100 from a generous stranger. But as the weeks passed and Isaac's condition deteriorated, Elizabeth watched those numbers climb with agonizing slowness. $47,000. It was an incredible amount of generosity. It was also a drop in the ocean of what she needed. Isaac was moved to the ICU in week 6, his small body hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed, keeping him alive. Elizabeth stopped going home. She slept in the chair beside his bed, waking up every time a monitor changed rhythm, every time a nurse came to check vitals. "Mom," Isaac said one evening, his voice weak, "am I going to die?" What do you say to that? How do you lie to your child when you've built your entire relationship on honesty? "No, baby," Elizabeth whispered, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "I'm going to fix this." But she had no idea how. Elizabeth wasn't a religious woman. She'd stopped believing in God around the same time her ex-husband walked out, leaving her pregnant and alone. But that night, in that empty chapel, she prayed anyway. Not elegant prayers. Just desperate, broken pleas. Please, please, not my son. Take anything else. Take everything else, just not him. The silence that answered felt like judgment. 2 days later, Dr. Martinez found Elizabeth in the cafeteria, staring at a cup of coffee she hadn't drunk. The doctor's face was grave. "Elizabeth, we need to talk about next steps." "We have 2 weeks," Dr. Martinez said carefully. "After that, Isaac's name moves to the inactive list. Without the funding secured." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Elizabeth nodded slowly. 2 weeks, 14 days, 336 hours, each one counting down to a future where Isaac didn't exist. That night, she made the transfer. Every dollar she had. It wasn't enough, but it was something. It was all she had left to give. And then, the miracle happened. "Mrs. Patterson," Margaret Chen said, her voice trembling with emotion, "I have extraordinary news." Elizabeth barely heard her. She was too numb, too exhausted to process anything anymore. "Someone has made a donation to cover Isaac's transplant. The full amount." The words took several seconds to penetrate. "I'm sorry, what?" $800,000. An anonymous donor. The transfer completed this morning. Margaret turned her computer screen around. There it was. Real. Actual. Elizabeth stared at the numbers. Who? Who did this? That's the thing. They insisted on complete anonymity. The donation was routed through an offshore account, multiple layers. Our legal team has already verified everything. It's legitimate. It's real. But who would... Elizabeth's voice broke. Who would give that much money? Margaret shook her head. I don't know. But whoever they are, they saved your son's life. Isaac's surgery was scheduled for the following week. The wait was agonizing, but it was a different kind of agony now. Not the agony of hopelessness, but the agony of hope itself, of possibility, of what if this actually works. The surgery was successful. 3 words. 3 words that meant Isaac would live to see 8 years old, 9, 10, 20, 50. Elizabeth's legs gave out. She sank into a chair and sobbed with a release that felt like her entire body was expelling 6 months of terror. Isaac's recovery was slow but steady. 6 weeks in the hospital, physical therapy, medications that would be lifelong companions. But he was alive. He was laughing again. He was asking for chicken nuggets and complaining about hospital food. He was her son, and he was going to live. But through all of it, one question haunted Elizabeth like a ghost. Who saved him? She tried to find out. She begged Margaret for any information. She hired a private investigator who came back empty-handed after 3 weeks. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing, he told her. Professional-grade anonymity. I'm sorry, but they don't want to be found. Elizabeth set up a small altar in her living room. Every night she'd light a candle and say thank you to the unknown savior who'd given her back her son. She'd imagine different people, a wealthy philanthropist who read Isaac's story online, a lottery winner looking to do good in the world, an elderly widow with no family of her own, passing on her legacy. But none of the scenarios felt right. Something nagged at her, something in the precision of it all, the exact amount needed. The timing, just as hope was running out. The insistence on anonymity that bordered on paranoid. This wasn't random charity. This was personal. 3 months after Isaac came home, Elizabeth received a package. Elizabeth's hands shook as she held the photograph. She hadn't seen this picture in over 20 years. It was from the Christmas before her father left, before everything fell apart, before her mother started drinking, before her brother Matthew. The name hit her like a physical blow. Her brother Matthew, who she hadn't spoken to in 5 years, who disappeared after their mother's funeral, unable to face the family he'd let down for decades. Matthew, who'd struggled with addiction, who'd lost job after job, who'd finally cut ties with everyone who loved him. Matthew, who couldn't possibly have $800,000. Could he? Elizabeth's mind raced. The last time she'd seen Matthew, he was wearing a borrowed suit to their mother's funeral. looking hollowed out and decades older than his 38 years. He'd hugged her briefly, whispered, "I'm sorry," and walked away. She'd tried to follow, but he'd vanished into the crowd. Before that, maybe 2 years earlier, a phone call where he'd been clearly drunk, rambling about mistakes and regrets. She'd tried to help him find rehab, but he'd hung up on her. This man couldn't have saved Isaac. It was impossible. But then, who else would send her a childhood photograph? Elizabeth hired a different private investigator. She gave him Matthew's last known information, the photo, everything she could remember. "Find my brother," she told him. "I need to know if he's alive, where he is, what he's doing." 2 weeks later, the investigator called. "I found him, but you're not going to believe this." Matthew had changed his name 4 years ago. Legal name change, all the paperwork done properly. He was now Marcus Thompson. He lived in Philadelphia, and he worked as a night janitor at a pharmaceutical company. A janitor. Elizabeth felt relief that he was alive, confusion about the name change, and crushing disappointment. A janitor couldn't afford an $800,000 donation. She'd been chasing shadows. "There's one more thing," the investigator said. "I did some digging into his past. 4 years ago, right before the name change, he was released from prison." The world stopped. Prison? For what? Vehicular manslaughter. He served 3 years. Elizabeth ended the call and sat in stunned silence. Her brother had killed someone. Matthew had killed someone and never told her, never reached out, just disappeared into a new name and a new life. But still the question remained. Had he saved Isaac? There was only one way to find out. Elizabeth watched her brother lock the door to his apartment building and start walking down the street. He looked so different. Older, yes, but also smaller somehow. Diminished. His shoulders hunched against the cold Philadelphia wind. His uniform hung loose on his thin frame. This was not a man who had money, but Elizabeth had come too far to turn back now. She waited until Matthew reached the corner, then got out of the car. "Isaac, stay here for a minute, okay? Lock the doors." "Where are you going, Mom?" "To talk to someone. I'll be right back." She followed Matthew for 2 blocks, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Finally, she called out, "Matthew!" He stopped. For a long moment, he didn't turn around. When he finally did, his face cycled through shock, fear, resignation, and something that might have been relief. "Elizabeth," he said quietly, "I wondered when you'd find me." They stood there on that Philadelphia street corner. 2 siblings who'd once been inseparable, now strangers separated by years and secrets and pain. "Was it you?" Elizabeth asked. "The donation. Was it you?" Matthew's eyes filled with tears. He nodded. How did you?" "Not here," Matthew said. There's someone you should meet. Someone I want Isaac to meet, his uncle." Isaac was shy at first, hiding behind Elizabeth's leg as Matthew opened the door to his apartment. But Matthew knelt down to Isaac's level, and his face transformed. Pure joy, mixed with pain, mixed with love. "You must be Isaac," Matthew said softly. "I've heard so much about you." "Are you really my uncle?" Isaac asked. "I am. And you? You're the bravest kid I've ever heard of." They sat in Matthew's small living room. Elizabeth's mind was spinning, trying to reconcile this humble apartment with an $800,000 donation. Nothing made sense. "Tell me everything," Elizabeth said. "From the beginning." Matthew took a deep breath. 6 years ago, I was driving drunk. I ran a red light," Matthew continued, his voice hollow. "Hit another car, a young couple, David and Linda Chen. They had a 2-year-old daughter in the back seat. She survived, they didn't." Elizabeth felt her stomach drop. "Matthew, I killed them, Elizabeth. I killed 2 people because I was too drunk and selfish to call a cab." Tears streamed down Matthew's face. "I got 3 years, served every day. When I got out, I couldn't be Matthew Patterson anymore. That person didn't deserve to exist, so I became someone else." "But the money," Elizabeth said. How did you have that kind of money? Remember Mom's estate? I'd walked away from all of it, told the lawyer I didn't want anything. For years, the lawyer tried to find me. Finally, after I got out of prison and changed my name, she tracked me down. My portion was $863,000. Money I didn't earn. Money I didn't deserve. Matthew stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. I've spent the last 4 years trying to make amends. I got this job. I live cheap. I send money every month to Sarah Chen, David and Linda's daughter. She's 15 now, living with Linda's sister. I'll never bring her parents back, but at least I can help give her a future. He turned back to Elizabeth. Then one day I was online. I saw a GoFundMe, your face, Isaac's face, and I thought, I took a life. I can't let another one die when I have the power to prevent it. The room fell silent except for Isaac's quiet breathing. The boy had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from the long day. You killed someone, Elizabeth said, her voice breaking. You killed 2 people. I know. And you saved my son. I know. I don't. Elizabeth pressed her hands to her face. I don't know how to feel. You're my brother, you're a killer, you're Isaac's savior, I don't know what you are. Matthew's face crumpled. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. For everything, for disappearing, for not being there. For every way I failed you and Mom. I don't want forgiveness, Elizabeth. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know. Isaac lives because David and Linda died. That's my burden. That's what I carry every single day. Elizabeth looked at her sleeping son. His chest rose and fell with the steady rhythm of a healthy heart. A heart that worked because of money, that existed because of death. These are the kinds of hopeful journeys that remind us life is never simple. Real-life stories don't come with easy answers or neat conclusions. Subscribe if you want more heartwarming stories that challenge what we think we know about redemption, sacrifice, and grace. Because this story isn't over yet. Isaac asked me something the other day, Elizabeth said quietly. He asked if you were a good person or a bad person. What did you tell him? I told him I didn't know. I told him I thought you were both. Matthew nodded slowly. That's fair. That's more than fair. 1 year passed, then another. The relationship between Elizabeth and Matthew was not simple. It was not easy. There were days Elizabeth looked at him and saw only the man who'd taken 2 lives. There were days she saw the man who'd saved her son. Most days she saw both. Matthew became part of Isaac's life, careful, respectful of Elizabeth's boundaries, but present. He taught Isaac to fly kites. He showed up to school plays. He remembered birthdays. And he introduced Isaac to Sarah Chen. Sarah was 16 now, cautious and damaged but trying to heal. Matthew had told her the truth years ago, revealed himself as the man who'd killed her parents. She'd hated him at first. But over time, as he kept showing up, kept supporting her, kept being honest about his guilt and his efforts to change, something shifted. He can't bring them back, Sarah told Elizabeth once. But he's trying. That has to count for something. Did it? Elizabeth still didn't know. Maybe she'd never know. But she knew this. Isaac was alive. He was thriving. He was 9 years old now, playing soccer, doing homework, complaining about vegetables. All the normal, beautiful, ordinary things that almost weren't. And sometimes that had to be enough. Elizabeth learned that grace isn't about deserving. It's not transactional. You don't earn it by being good enough or paying enough penance. Grace is what you give when nothing makes sense, when the math doesn't add up, when the person who destroyed lives is the same person who saved one. Grace is messy, redemption is messy, life is messy, but love finds a way through the mess. Elizabeth watched Matthew and Isaac and Sarah together in that park, 3 people connected by tragedy and salvation, and she felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. Not the desperate hope of a mother watching her child die. Not the overwhelming hope of an impossible miracle. Just quiet, steady hope that tomorrow would come, and they'd all figure it out together. Isaac's donor heart beat strong in his chest. Matthew carried his guilt with more grace. Sarah learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. And Elizabeth discovered that sometimes the most heartwarming stories are the ones without neat endings. Because real-life stories don't tie up perfectly. They continue. They evolve. They challenge us to be bigger than our pain, our judgment, our certainty about who deserves what. This is a story about an anonymous donation that saved a life. But it's also a story about the cost of redemption, the weight of grace, and the truth that we're all both the villain and the hero of someone's story. If this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it made you think about forgiveness and second chances and the impossible complexity of being human, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories that don't shy away from the hard truths. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that hopeful journeys don't always look the way we expect. And leave a comment telling me, what would you have done in Elizabeth's place? Because I genuinely want to know. These heartwarming stories are meant to start conversations, not end them. Matthew Patterson, now Marcus Thompson, will never stop carrying the weight of what he did. But he also gets to carry the joy of what he saved. Both truths exist simultaneously. And somewhere in Philadelphia, in a modest apartment with bare walls, there's a photo of 4 people flying a kite together. A broken family, stitched together by tragedy and choice, and the radical decision to keep showing up for each other. That's grace. That's redemption. That's life. And Isaac? He's going to grow up knowing his uncle made terrible mistakes. He's also going to grow up knowing that same uncle gave everything to save him. He'll have to make sense of that contradiction himself. But he'll do it with a beating heart, and years ahead of him, and a family that, despite everything, loves him enough to navigate the impossible together. Sometimes, that's all any of us can hope for.